Hi, guys. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I know I'm 5 minutes early. I figured I would jump on a little early to make sure that everything is working like it needs to work. So far, so good. Okay. I I am so technologically needy at times that I like to make sure that everything is running smoothly before I jump on. And I see some of you have already signed on, so this is good to see. I'm going to go ahead and just introduce this topic. We might as well, right, guys? This is an interesting topic. And I was just sitting here for a little bit, going through some of my previous live chats, and it looks like we've discussed the psychology of just about everything other than we've kind of touched on the topic of deception and control. So I want to talk about that in tonight's live chat, the psychology of deception and control. There is literally the psychology of how an individual perceives other people, perceives their reality, how they engage with other people, how they isolate and withdraw. There's some psychology to all of that. And sadly, for the most of you on this channel, and I'm sure you're going to be able to relate tonight, for the most of you on this channel, deception and control is at the core of your relationships when it comes to family engagement, when it comes to maybe a husband-wife situation, a romantic situation, and even a friendship and a boss and employee. Deception and control are two very powerful terms. And I think we experience it in our lives more than we either recognize or care to recognize. So in tonight's live chat, I'm going to be delving into the psychology of human beings who deceive and also human beings who control. And in this conversation, what's going to kind of evolve out of this live chat is an awareness of the various tactics that have probably been used on you, in addition to what the research in psychology says is the biggest problem that we have when it comes to deception and control. So I will mention those things in tonight's live chat. Let me throw out some things to think about, guys, before I jump into the actual chat here and we start chatting and talking. And you're going to hear some new words tonight. The first thing that you want to keep in mind as we go along through this conversation tonight is something known as dichotomous thinking. Dichotomous thinking. You can also refer to it as black and white thinking. You can refer to it as polarized thinking. The idea behind dichotomous thinking, and this is something that an individual who wants control and sometimes are in the process of deceiving want. This is what they want. They want you to kind of get stuck, not being able to see the gray, right? They want you to see things in very narrow terms, in very narrow ways. Black and white thinking is something that happens to a controller, and it also is something that happens to an individual who wants to deceive. For the deceptive individual in your world, black and white thinking, polarized thinking, dichotomous thinking is a wonderful tool, because you don't have the opportunity. I'll put it this way. You don't have the opportunity to see outside of the box, because that controlling individual wants to keep you focused on one specific thing. In order to be deceived, you have to be somebody who doesn't look at everything. You have to be somebody that doesn't look at every corner and every inch of the situation. For the controller and the deceptive individual, if they can get you thinking in black and white terms without looking at the bigger picture, they've got you, right? It's kind of like, I hope I'm saying this correctly, it's kind of like the saying, you can't see the forest for the trees, right? You're looking at something completely different in such a way that you miss the details. So a deceptive and controlling individual would like for you to see things in black and white terms. They also see things in black and white terms most of the time. They don't see the gray. They don't see the possibilities. Everything is very narrow. Okay. A deceptive and controlling individual could also use something that we call splitting. Now, for those of you who, read a lot about borderline personality disorder, or you have family members, or, you're close to somebody that has borderline personality, you probably have heard this term splitting. Let me just clarify something when it comes to splitting. Splitting is not just specific to borderline personality. I think a lot of people can engage in the behavior of splitting, right? Splitting is almost a psychological trap. Okay, guys, it's almost a psychological trap because what happens in the process of splitting is there's an idolization, meaning that I see you in my ideal way. I see you in a positive way. I almost idolize you. I see all the positive things in you. So there's that component. But then on the other side of that is the process of devaluation, that I kind of devalue you at this point. I minimize your importance in my world, the impact that you have, or I just stop seeing you in positive ways. And that actually changes my behavior in such a way that I then become an enemy, or I then see you as the enemy. And so a controlling, deceptive individual, whichever they are, they could be both controlling and deceptive, or they could just be controlling, or they could just be deceptive, whatever the case. Splitting is something that either happens intentionally or unintentionally. For the deceptive individual who lies, manipulates, triangulates, uses deflection, we're going to get into all of this tonight. An individual who does all of those things can use splitting to his or her advantage. You know, they treat you like a lovely, wonderful person with zero flaws. And the next minute, they're treating like you're the complete devil. And part of that is their fault. Or maybe I should say the majority of that is their fault, because what happens is they unfairly evaluate you and they unfairly categorize you. And so when you are just human, or you are experiencing something and maybe you're not looking so shiny in their eyes all of a sudden, instead of them saying, I'm going to give that person some grace because maybe I've been looking at this a little bit too positively, or maybe I'm looking at this in a way that's not fair. Instead of that controlling individual giving you the benefit of the doubt, they just see you as a person they need to throw away. Splitting, it's a psychological trap. It's a trap, and it's a trap that creates even bigger problems, because the individual goes from possibly looking at you as, somebody that can't make any errors or mistakes, to an individual who is not supposed to be making mistakes, because now you're no longer what I need you to be. A controlling person also experiences that. I'm going to kind of devalue you and minimize you because I can't use you anymore. You no longer fit my cookie cutter image of what you should be. And so therefore, I'm washing my hands of you and I'm done. Sometimes ghosting, a lot of you know that term, ghosting, is basically a slang for saying, I have completely stonewalled you. I have put up a brick wall. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want to engage with you. I don't want to be connected to you. Ghosting, that's another way to say ghosting, but ghosting happens with individuals who split. Let me also drop another term that maybe you haven't heard of. I know a lot of you have heard of splitting. Dichotomous thinking may have been a new term, but here's another term, and this is essential to tonight's conversation, and you're going to see why in a second. There's a term that Gregory Bateson came up with in 1956. He studied theories around thinking patterns and behaviors. And what he came up with, and I'm going to make sure I post that in the description box for all of you so you can see it. But what he came up with is a term known as double bind communication. Double bind communication. Here's what that is. You have a controlling, unstable, possibly manipulative individual in your space, a mother, a father, sadly, a sibling, a spouse, a very close friend, an extended family member. They are very controlling. They are also deceptive. They may even be a covert narcissist. Whatever the issue is with them, they may engage in double bind communication. It's when they send you two or more messages, or you actually see two or more messages. They don't always know what they're doing. Sometimes they do, but they send you two or more messages, or you identify two or more messages that are conflicting 100%. So it's almost like a double bind, that you try one thing that is wrong, you try another thing because you feel that it's possibly the right thing, which it may be, but the individual also takes that as a negative thing. So I'm going to give you an example here in just a minute. You may do one thing in an attempt to create some peace or get along or stay connected or be open or whatever. That is the wrong thing. So then you kind of backtrack or try something else in hopes that that's the right thing, and it's still the wrong thing. Double bind communication. There's often a receptor, okay? You are the one who's receiving the message, so you would be the receptor. The individual, sadly, ends up clinging to two conflicting messages. In your mind, if I just do A, B, or C, that should be good, and that's still the wrong thing. So the receptor would be you. You're the one receiving the conflicting messages from the individual, okay? The opposite meaning is taken from your attempt to give the right response. I'm going to break this down in just a second. Just bear with me. And your reaction or your response to the person may actually be a positive one. For the majority of situations, maybe your response to this complicated, controlling individual is a response that would put out any fire. It doesn't put out the fire for this person. It actually fails because the individual doesn't accept it either, no matter how hard you want them to accept it. So let's say, for example, this is your father. I'm going to give you this example. So let's say, for example, this is your father, and I'm going to go to the chat box in just a minute. This is your father, okay? Your father has always been a complicated personality, controlling, overwhelming, minimizing, condescending. He's very difficult in terms of communication. You don't know which way to take him, okay? Let's say you guys sit down and you try to have a very complicated conversation. You guys have been clashing lately. There's been a lot of storms and emotional chaos. You don't know why you and dad are clashing. You sit down with your dad over some coffee and you guys are laughing and really on the same page. And you may say something to your dad like, "Dad, I want to give you an opportunity to just talk to me about what's been wrong with you lately. I want you to talk." And let's say, for example, your dad goes, "Why do you want me to talk? You feel like I'm hiding something from you?" And let's say you say, "Oh, no, 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 no. I just wanted to give you an opportunity to talk and, just share with me what I'm possibly doing wrong. Is it me? Are we just having a bad month? What do you think it is?" Double bind communication could be something like, "Oh, so now you're going to force me to talk? I don't want to talk to you. I've never done that to you when you were growing up. I let you have your free space." And you may say, "Oh, yeah, Dad. Oh, yeah, I totally understand. How about we not talk about this at all? Let's just drop it. I didn't say anything." Dad goes, "Oh, so we're going to run from this now? We're not going to have a conversation? We're going to run from this? Oh, so first you want me to talk. You force me to talk. And now that I bring up the fact that I didn't raise you that way, now you just want to drop it all of a sudden? Oh, yeah, this is something you do all the time." Okay. And let's say you say, "Oh, no, no, no. I want to talk about it. I don't want to drop this. I just thought maybe if it's going to be a problem, maybe we should just drop it." Your dad may go a step further. I know you guys are relating to this. Dad may go a step further and say, "Oh, so you're going to try to placate me now? Oh, man. I mean, I thought we were meeting over coffee. I guess we're not." You may say, "Dad, I want us to have a good time today. I don't want us to fight." "Oh, it's too late." You do this all the time. You bring bad things up, you cause chaos, and we do this. You know what? I'm done with this. I'm done. Let's not talk. Let's not talk. Give me a week and I'll get back to you. Conversation over. Have you ever experienced that? Double bind communication. You go this way, it's wrong. You go that way, it's wrong. You go up, it's wrong. You go down, it's wrong. Nothing you say or do is ever right. Controlling and deceptive individuals, they engage in this behavior all the time. Okay, I'm going to go to the chat box and see what you guys are saying. I'm going to welcome you. We're going to jump into this topic because I want to give you some common behaviors of individuals like this. This is actually a topic that, and I'm going to drop this now. I won't wait till later. It's called the Deception Research Society. The Deception Research Society. You should be able to Google them. And they are a group of researchers, individuals who have experienced deception. They want to further study deception. And they also want to highlight some common behaviors that happens in families and romance and marriages and friendships. And, you know, they're really there. The Deception Research Society is really there to understand the mind of the deceptive, controlling individual. So you might be interested in learning a little more. I'll make sure that I post that in the description box for you so that you can learn a little bit more. But I want to give you, as we go along tonight, some common behaviors. What are you likely to see with individuals like this? Because this is an actual area of psychological research, controlling and deceptive people. This is what they do. I also want to give you some research on what's happening here, right? And how does psychology define what we just talked about here? And then I want to give you some telltale signs that something is off. Something is completely off. Whoever this is in your life who does these things or expresses these behavioral patterns, I want to give you some information on what's wrong here and what are the signs that you're dealing with a person who's a controller. And how do you deal with that? So we're going to get into that. Let me welcome Fairy Girl. Fairy Girl, welcome to tonight's live chat. So glad to have you back. And thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that you mentioned that because a lot of people are dealing with the storms in Florida. I have 3 clients that are in Florida as we speak for vacation. And they contacted me. They told me they were okay. But, you know, things can change from one minute to the next. So thank you for that, Fairy Girl. Nancy, welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. Glad to see you. Sylvia, Love Jones, hello and welcome. Happy Friday to you. I'm so glad. So glad. I don't feel good today. You know how you're coming down with something, your head hurts, the back of your eyes hurts, everything is just, you feel yourself going down. That's where I'm at today. So my energy may be a little bit lacking, so forgive me for that. But I hope you're having a happy Friday as well, Sylvia. Dennis Robinson, hello and welcome. Hope you're having a wonderful weekend as well. Glad to see you. Keisha Monique, glad to see you as well. James McDonald, so glad to see you back. Yeah, it has been a while, hasn't it? Phoenix, hello and welcome. Hope you're having a good weekend. Dietz, the chosen one. I hope I said that correct. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Looking for comments as we go along. Raymond Vincent Garcia Jr., hello and welcome. Always glad to see you in the chat box. You always share really cool things and insightful experiences. So glad to see you. FIFA LaFleur, hello and welcome. Glad to have you back. Glad to see you. She Prays. Glad to see you back as well. Hello and welcome. Siobhan, I hope I have the name correct this time. I think I do. Glad to see you. Tammy Nicely, I see you as well. Courtney Frazier, hello to the both of you. All right, I'm going through looking for comments. Juby Joe, hello and welcome back. So glad to see you. Danielle Keith, glad to see you. Ellie Wynn, glad to see you. It's been cold lately. So much for that. Thank you so much for that. And yes, glad to see you. Blessings to you. FIFA LaFleur says, oh, geez, this fits my family. Yeah. That's rough, isn't it? We're going to get into it tonight. It's been cold lately says, how do you spell that D word? Dichotomous. You ready? Dichotomous. I was a spelling bee champ. So hopefully I get this correct. Dichotomous. 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 Tell me if I messed that up. Knowing me, I probably did, but I hope that's correct. We'll see. Maybe somebody Google it and tell me if that was correct. Tinnitus abysmos. I always mess that up. I apologize, but welcome. I'm glad to see you back tonight. Thank you, Mrs. Ed. You're awesome. Thank you for doing that. James McDonald and welcome to the chat, by the way. Glad to see you. James McDonald says, unfortunately, a lot of my memories of my mother are being deceived, misled, and betrayed by someone who should have had the best intentions for me. Absolutely. And it can be very traumatizing, right, James? Because the last thing we want to believe is that a family member or a parent, right, of all people, a parent would engage in this behavior. But we have to consider, and this is where out of the box thinking kind of takes over, right? Because we need to be aware of the fact that parents themselves could have had problems growing up. They could have been traumatized. They could have been diagnosed with oppositional defiant disorder. They could have been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder or narcissism or a narcissistic personality disorder, excuse me. They could also be sociopaths, right? And psychopaths and an individual with dark triad traits, right? We rarely look at the fact that parents can be that way, but it is a reality. So when deception and control comes into a parent-child relationship, especially a parent-adult-child relationship, it's hard to wrap your mind around, right? Yeah. We've been very brainwashed to believe that parents are almost perfect. They do their best, most of them. Most parents are wonderful, but then you have that small percentage of parents who should never have become parents, right? Either they don't know how to raise their kids, they don't know how to put structure in, or they don't know how to love and be honest, or they don't know how to meet your needs, whatever the case. Some people should have never had children. And I so hate to say that, but my experience as a therapist has really introduced me to that. Some parents just shouldn't be parents. Fifi LaFleur says, my family has lots of secrets and they keep me shut out as the scapegoat. Yes, yes. There's actually a funny commercial, and I'm certainly not making light of this, but there's a funny commercial that just came out, and I saw it the other night several times on TV. And it's commercial. I think it's like a cell phone commercial. And the Modern Family, I think, is in that commercial. And the commercial shows that everybody has a particular cell phone plan that allows them to engage in group texts. And another family member goes, "Oh, I didn't get that text," those of you who may have seen it, help me out here. But the commercial, one of the guys of the Modern Family says, "Oh, I didn't get that text," and the other family, the other side of the family who has the cell phone plan that allows group text, they're like, "Oh, that's because we left you out of it," and the other family member gets so huffy and upset. It's something that happens quite a bit, and that's why I'm bringing this up. It happens quite a bit, more so than we care to acknowledge, that when you are the ousted individual within the family, you are going to be the one who's going to be either the last person who gets information or the person in the family who doesn't get information at all. And if that happens extensively over a long period of time, that can actually lead to complex PTSD, depending on what the situation entails. We're going to get into a little bit of that tomorrow, and I'm going to give you some insight on what that chat tomorrow is going to look like. Chanel M, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to have you, and thank you so much for that. I'm so glad that my videos are really helpful. And I say this every end of my live chats, that you guys in the chat box make this channel so informative as well. So I am grateful for that. Thank you so much for that, guys. Elizabeth, it's been a long time. So glad to see you back in tonight's live chat. Welcome. Juby Joe says, so they have to have your full trust, taking advantage of your kindness and love for them. I'm not sure I understand that. I think that's a sarcasm statement, is it? I'm going to take it that way. Forgive me if it's wrong. I'm going to take it that way, though. A lot of deceptive and controlling people end up that way. They want all they can get from you, but don't you deceive them. Don't you deceive them, because that's a whole other thing. Phoenix says, I came across something that compared anxious versus avoidant attachment, and it described my unhealed mom and I. Also, enablers, which I was, and she is. Was wondering if vulnerable narcs have these traits. I'm still trying to figure us out. We're both married to a narc and think we both took on some of their traits. I am loyal to a fault, though. She isn't. Yeah, I totally get you. I totally get you. Okay. So I'm going to divulge this truth. This is one of my vulnerabilities. I am not an expert on attachment. I'm not. I'm not an expert on attachment. Some of my colleagues are. I try my very best to learn and continue to learn about attachment. I know enough, but I'm really not an expert on attachment theory. I do know somebody who is, and I can actually post our live chat in the description box for you so that you can go back and look at that live chat. But, and I also have some colleagues that work very close to me on a daily basis who are really good at talking about attachment. And I can post some of their things in the description box as well. In terms of anxious and avoidant attachment and enablers and people who marry vulnerable narcissists and things like that, that's a possibility, right? The anxious attachment seems to be very, very connected to the vulnerable narcissist for many reasons. And I'm not going to get into that, Phoenix, right now because that's going to derail us. But it's something that is definitely attached. And I can actually post some information in the description box that can be helpful. Atala, I hope I said that correctly. Welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad this is resonating with you. Longevity Rituals. Hello and welcome, welcome. Yep, glad this is resonating with you as well. We're going to get back into this in just a second. Louis S., hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. KD, hello and welcome back. Katie says, splitting is the mind going in protection mode, yet the ability to choose does play a role. So seek validation. Don't believe it, and you're not useless. Ghosting also occurs when it's God's gift. So let me kind of tease that apart a little bit. Splitting can be the mind going into overprotection or protection mode. That is really not a scientific or clinical way to describe splitting. Splitting can sometimes be protective, of course, but it is very much a detrimental thing, not only to the individual who's using it, but to the other person, because again, splitting is devaluation and idolizing something or seeing something in an ideal fashion, which is sometimes over the top, right? It's splitting is kind of like, I idolize you. That's the word I'm looking for. I make this overly positive, you're this God. And then whenever you do something that's so human, I'm going to then devalue you, and I'm going to devalue you in a way that's extraordinarily devaluing. And so therefore you are not only a God, but then on the flip side, you're also the devil. And so there's no gray, there's no in between, there's no balance, there's no fairness. It's all yes or no. It's dichotomous thinking in a sense, but there's different ways that we can also discuss and define splitting. So we may get into that at a later time. T-Mac, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to have you back tonight. One last person, Siobhan. I'm going to read this before we get into the content. You say you just can't win ever with them. That is correct. You cannot. And let me also say, too, that a person who splits you can sometimes also put you in a double bind communication trap. They can split you, but also use double bind communication. Nothing you say or do in any way is the right way. Nothing you do is ever right, because whichever way you go is a trap, And so some individuals put you in a bind psychologically and emotionally. They split you. You're no longer wonderful. Now you're the devil. And then on top of that, when you go to make it better, they say that's not better because there's a problem with that as well. And so that's very much a trap. Very, very much a trap. Okay, guys, let's get into the content. All right. So what are some common behaviors in a controlling, manipulative, deceptive individual? And of course, let me highlight this one last time. It doesn't have to be all of these. You could just be just be dealing with a controller. It doesn't have to be a deceptive and controlling person. Okay. I want to make sure that I clarify that. So what's common for these individuals? Well, one common thing is, or one common behavior that we do see as therapists, is that they sometimes, these individuals, make it really hard for you to escape. It may be easy for you to get into a relationship with them, or converse with them, or bond with them, or share your life with them. But once you get in, coming out of it is really difficult, because what happens over time, and this is backed by research in psychology on relationships, what happens over time is that bond between the two of you can sometimes get more and more, I'll put it this way, it can become stronger over time. And so it makes it really difficult for you to kind of backstep or get out of that relationship. Let's say, for example, you marry somebody who you really think is wonderful, and now you've been in this marriage for 6 years, and you're starting to see that this individual's a sociopath. This individual has no emotional warmth for you or anybody else. This person seems very shut off from the rest of the world. They isolate and withdraw. They're mean. They have road rage to the point of just being a bully. And when you try to bring it up, they lash out at you. You can't really have an open, honest conversation because it ends in a fight. Or, you ready for this? It ends in domestic violence. These kind of individuals, for example, it's easy to get into a relationship with them, right? Bond over time. But when you go to get out, that's a whole other thing. It becomes violent, or it becomes manipulative, or it becomes a legal matter, right? Sometimes it's really difficult to escape. So these kind of individuals make it hard for you to escape. If it's a situation where your parent is the controller, the deceiver, the manipulator, that can be really difficult to set boundaries with them, because then they start the guilt trip. Then they start the triangulation, going to another family member to talk about you, right? Or maybe they punish you in some undercurrent, covert way. So they make it really hard for you to escape or set boundaries. The other thing that seems to be really common with these kind of individuals is you receive some kind of punishment for trying to set a boundary, even if the boundary is fair, right? You may pick up the phone and call your brother and say, look, I have to bring this up. I've been trying so very hard not to bring this up, because I really do want to make our relationship conflict free. But you continue to do A, B, and C. You may not notice that you're doing it, but I see a pattern. And for us to have a healthy relationship, that pattern has to be acknowledged and it has to be corrected. So let's say this is you having a conversation with your brother. He may say, I hear you. I understand. Thank you for pointing that out. You go your separate ways. He ruminates and obsesses and ruminates over what you said to him, the conversation. And then emotions start to rise, right? Then he starts to feel like a victim. He starts to feel like you're pointing him out. So then what does he do? He goes into full-blown conflict mode. And so now everything you do is being punished. You call him, he rejects your phone calls. You text him or post on social media, he deletes your things, or he doesn't pay attention to it. He avoids your phone calls. He minimizes you. He talks about you behind your back, right? So you get punished some kind of way, in some fashion, because he can't take the truth and he doesn't want to see the truth, or he can't see it. So what happens? He punishes you for it. So this is a very common behavior. Nothing you do is right. We just talked about that. And double bind communication, that's also an issue. And also, oh my God, let me start over. That's also an issue. And also in this category is something we call deflection. I'll use that term first. Deflection. That's basically shifting the focus in the moment, in the conversation, to something else. And deflection can happen through throwing a joke into the middle of something. Let's say you're trying to be very serious with your mom. Mom, I feel like you're not hearing me. You're not giving me the support that I feel like you should be as an adult child. Can you just please respect my boundary, right? You're having a serious conversation with your mom. What does she do? Starts laughing. Oh, I'm so sorry. I just thought about the time your dad said A, B, and C, and boom, everything is derailed, right? So a joke Changing the topic abruptly can also be deflection. Asking a question can sometimes be deflection. Let me know in the chat box if you guys have experienced this. Asking a question, pointing out flaws, or pointing out an inconsistency in something, that can also be deflection. It's taking the present moment and derailing in some form or fashion. Also, too, there's limited ability in these individuals to delay gratification, to delay instant gratification. So that may make it really difficult for them to listen to you, to be open with you in the relationship, because this individual needs control at all times. So they don't know how to delay gratification. They want what they want, and they're very impulsive, and they want it now, and you're going to go along with it. They're not only controlling, they also have an issue with gratification, and they don't know how to delay it. This also goes into something that I mentioned this past week, or in the last couple of days, which is stalking. Stalking is also a common behavior for these individuals who deceive, individuals who manipulate, and individuals who want to control. They also become stalkers. Whatever kind of stalker you want to label them, an intimacy stalker, a predatory stalker, a psychotic stalker, a family stalker, whatever stalker you want to mention or label them as, it doesn't matter. The goal is to control and manipulate, gain power. And so, it's something that I've talked about a lot on this channel. I'm going to post some of my previous videos in the description box so that you can go over them if you choose, and look at the various psychological profiles of a stalker, because their goal is often to control and to manipulate. That's really what they want. They want the power, and they do it by taking your freedom, or at least attempting to. Okay, before I go back to the chat box, let me give you some information on what's happening here. And then we're going to talk about the signs that you may notice so that you can know what is off and why is it that way. Okay, so we're going to get into that. But let me look at some of the research with you before I go back to the chat box. A lot of research in the realm of control and manipulation, deception, these are all tactics, and it's in research, it's really considered the psychology of personality development. The psychology of personality development, and I'm going to throw this in here, the psychology of personality pathology. All of these things entails a personality pathology. It says that an individual doesn't only do one of these things, two of these things, but they do several of these things. And they do this in a constant, pervasive, chronic pattern, to where they can actually go to a therapist and receive a diagnosis because they have a personality pathology. So research suggests that individuals with a personality pathology can sometimes change if a major life event happens. Let's say, for example, your dad has always been a little different. He's been interesting. He's a little controlling, but nothing more than that. You haven't been concerned. However, his mom dies 1 year, his dad dies another year, passes away. His daughter then tells him that she's being beat by her husband and he's going to kill her if she tries to leave. And then on top of those three major life-altering experiences, he has to go bankrupt in his business, file for bankruptcy, I should say, to be more correct, because his business is failing. Those are 4 different life-altering experiences, and research in the psychology of personality pathology says that these major life events can then shift or derail personality development, because we're constantly in evolution over time. So this research is saying, I'm going to make sure I post it so you can go back and look at it as well, that there are 2 major forms of change and transition that can cause a personality change. One is called gain-based experiences, meaning I've gained something. Gain-based experiences. I've gained something. I've gotten married. I've had twins. I've bought a new home, I've bought a new car, and I've opened up a business. That's a life, those are all life altering experiences that can shift behavior and personality in a positive way, or sometimes it can shift it in a negative way if it's stressful, right? Then there's also loss based experiences, meaning I've gotten a divorce, I've had to file for bankruptcy, my son committed suicide, or he was successful in his suicide attempt, the more appropriate way that I should say that. And my mom died. Okay, those are loss based experiences. Gain based, loss based, either way you flip the coin, it can alter personality. Okay, so that's what research is also highlighting here, that it can shift behavior, it can shift personality. Another thing research in psychology highlights as an issue for these individuals who have a personality pathology is delusional thinking. A delusion is a fixed belief. It's a fixed belief that is incongruent with reality. It is inconsistent with reality. It's something that doesn't make sense at all. It's fixed and it's held as a strong conviction. Think of the reality that you have to get up and go to work every day. Imagine somebody coming to you saying, you don't have to go to work today. And you say, yes, I do. And they say, no, you don't. And they are trying with all of their heart and mind to convince you that you don't have work today. A delusion is kind of like that. It's a very strongly held conviction, it is fixed and is incongruent with reality. It's inconsistent with reality. Research in personality pathology says that individuals can develop a delusional pattern of thinking over time, depending on what's happened to them, and that can get in the way. Of course, a personality disorder can also cause the need to control and be deceptive. An example of that would be paranoid personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, right? Narcissistic personality. These are all things that influence how a person behaves over time. Some research too that I had to look up for this live chat tonight says that there are 3 different reasons why individuals want to control and why they deceive. And this is, of course, a personality pathology, but these 3 things describes an individual and why they want to deceive. Research says one very common reason is instrumental reasons. Instrumental reasons, meaning I have a reason why I'm trying to control you. I have a very clear-cut reason why I'm lying to you right now, why I'm trying to control and deceive. The second thing is to promote self or protect the self. And the third thing that research suggests is to harm others. So those are 3 reasons why some people control and why some people deceive. I have a reason for wanting to do this. I have a very clear-cut reason. This is not an accident. 2, I'm trying to promote myself or protect myself. Or 3, I'm trying to harm you. Okay, so this is all the research is saying about deception and control. There's a lot more that I can get into that's going to stretch the time of this live chat, but just for the purposes of tonight, you want to keep those things in mind. The reasons why people deceive and want to control, the delusional thinking, and the life-altering experiences. Okay, I think I give you all in that category. Let me go to the chat box and see what you guys are saying, engage you, and then I'm going to give you some signs that something is going on and you really need to protect yourself. So we'll get into that. Yosef Badias, I probably messed that up. I apologize if I did. Welcome to tonight's live chat. You are right. Double bind is very manipulative. It's very manipulative. And some people engage in double bind communication on purpose. That is just who they are. They want to get in, they want to cause confusion, they want to cause some kind of inconsistency that's going to throw you off, right? And I hate to say this, but there's a lot of research on some individuals with borderline personality disorder, and they engage in double bind communication. You say one thing, they switch it to another. You say one thing, they switch it to another. It's like whichever way you flip the coin, you are the devil, and you're going to stay that way because they're not going to give you an opportunity to bounce back. It's just not going to happen. Sorry, guys, my chair is sliding. KD says parents and then significant others, etc. Oh, I've learned so very much, a lot. Yet glad, as it sure taught me so very much of them, as way too many people we interact with. Yep, we get not accept their behavior. I don't know what that means. Sorry, that's a little botched up, but I'm going to say I get what you're trying to say. You know, the experiences that you have had has given you that awareness and that insight into personality, and I agree with that. Jessica J, hello and welcome. You are so now late. Glad to see you. Hope you are doing well. Okay, Fifi LaFleur says they blocked me, silent treatment me, abandoned me. If I do anything, say anything that is wrong in their eyes, it's so painful. Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I'm sorry you have to go through that, Fifi LaFleur. That is difficult. Sun and Sunflowers, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. Phoenix says, maybe I'm in denial and just can't accept that my mom could be a narc because of how she used to treat me until I started confronting her about her behavior. I was treated as the fave when enabling her. Yeah. Oh, I'm so glad you said that, Phoenix. Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said that because that is a common behavior with an individual who's controlling, right? As long as you are for them, they are loving towards you. As long as you can back them up, they like you. As long as you can make sense out of their craziness and then still love them, they like you. But don't ever highlight what's wrong. Don't ever bring up what's wrong. Don't ever say that, they're wrong in the lives of anybody else, because they're going to turn on you. They're going to turn on you. That's a form of splitting as well. I like you when you're lovely. I hate you when I think that you're not lovely. That's splitting as well. Oh, that's difficult. MNSUGGA65. Hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Correct. I'm going to put that up on the screen. You're right. Yeah. Raymond Vincent Garcia also responds to double buying communication. Yep. Fairy Girl, I'm going to post your comment on the screen. Mrs. Ed says, good evening, Tamara. Hello and welcome. If I haven't already welcomed you. Mrs. Ed says, can double bind communication be compared to a question on a multiple choice test where there is no right answer? Yes. That is such an excellent way to put that. Absolutely. A, B, C, and D. None of the answers are right, so you lose. Absolutely. Absolutely. That's how that goes. It's been cold lately. I'm so glad. Thank you for that kindness. I so need that today. Today was a rough day, so thank you for that. And I'm so glad that it's helpful. Leslie Sturm, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Says double bind, B-I-N-D, double bind communication my whole life. I never knew. Yep. It keeps you stuck, right? And imagine if you're in a relationship with someone who's very impulsive and angry and reactive. What do you do then? The individual is putting you in a double bind. And then on top of that, you know that if you say the wrong thing, it's going to be an explosion. If you do the wrong thing, it's going to be an explosion. How do you get out of that, right? Because you can't rectify a situation that you see that's coming if the next thing that you're going to do is also the problem. So an example of this could be, let's say you're married and your husband has anger management issues. You said something, you corrected him on something, or you made a request and he didn't like it. And now he's huffing and now he's puffing and now he's slamming doors. And you go to your husband and you say, honey, I'm sorry. I don't want us to fight. And what is a common response, right? To somebody who's trying to make things better. If you're in a double bind kind of a encounter here, what's a common thing? They're going to respond back to you and say, well, you started a problem. And you may say, well, I want to end the problem. I don't want us to be in a fight. I just made a request. I didn't know it would set you off. Wrong thing to say. Set me off. What do you mean by set me off, right? And it continues and continues, and it can continue to continue. And that's the sad part about it, right? Courtney Fraser says, I feel like I can never win with my parents. Yep. I would say that could be double bind communication as well, depending on what's going on. Odetta, hello and welcome back to tonight's live chat. Always glad to see you as well. Says never got an answer. It's been a year since we have talked. I don't care at this point. Yeah. Yeah. Sometimes if you don't get an answer, that's a control tactic, right? Because they know you're waiting and the ball is in their court, but they're going to keep you waiting, right? That's just how they do it. That's who they are. It's a control tactic. Okay, just looking for comments. Yeah. GB Joe says they don't want to find a solution and common ground. That is correct. If you find a solution, right, then it makes them look like they've gotten upset for no reason, right? If you find a solution, then there's no need for an argument. And some people just like to argue. If you find a solution, it now shows them up as being the problem. If you find a solution, I'm I hope you guys are catching this. If you find a solution, then the individual feels like now you're minimizing them. So whichever way you go, it's a problem, right? They don't want you to find a solution because there is a solution, but they don't want there to be a solution because then that invalidates them somewhere. So there's some real psychology to how controlling these individuals can be. Yeah, you're welcome, longevity rituals. You're welcome. You're welcome. Raymond Vincent Garcia says double bind communication, a cumbia dance or cumbia dance of a deceptive person. My adrenaline is flowing right now. Yeah, I'm sure it is because right, it all comes center stage. It makes sense. I get that. Teresa, I hope I said that correctly. If not, forgive me. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for that. And I'm so glad that you are on the channel as well and that it's helpful. Hello, half the battle. Half the battle knowing is. Hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to see you. I've had that said to me in the past. I have. I once had a child say to me, she was 10 years old. She says, "Hey, Miss Tamara, I don't want to have you as a therapist." We had a really good relationship. And she's like, "I really don't want to have a relationship with you, Miss Tamara, because I'm afraid you can see through me." And that was a joke for the next 5 years that she remained in treatment with me. That's an honor. So thank you. MN Odell, MNL Odell. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for that. Glad this is helpful. Says, I kind of wish we didn't have so many of these. Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah, because every conversation we have and every time you see somebody in the chat box, which is why I go to the chat box, in case you guys are wondering why in the world does she spend so much time in the chat box? Number one, I like you. Number two, that's a learning group kind of a scenario, right? It's a thing that helps us grow and learn and share. It's also kind of like live therapy, right? And then on top of that, you get to see that you're not alone. So you're right, MNL Odell. Thank you so much, Phoenix. I really appreciate you for that. Kat, hello. Welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you back. Okay, just trying to scroll through. I don't want to miss anyone this time. Courtney Fraser says, and we're going to get back into the content. Courtney Fraser says, it is supposed to be windy here tonight, which does not help my PTSD or my stomach pain. Yes, I am so sorry to hear that. Yeah. Courtney Fraser, you might want to check into Comigo. I'm going to post their information in the description box. I think it was you that said you were interested in Comigo. Comigo, your insurance may cover it, and there are other ways to purchase it as well. So I'm going to put it in the description box specifically for you. Anybody can go in the description box and click on it and purchase it, but I'm going to make sure that I put it in there specifically for you with my coupon code. That may be helpful for some of the stomach pain because it sounds like anxiety. Sorry, guys, that was a side note. You're welcome. It's been cold lately, and thank you so much for that. James McDonald says, my parents were traumatized, Tamara, but it's still their responsibility to heal their childhood wounds. I agree. I don't disagree. Yeah, I don't disagree. Queen Butterfly, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to have you. Says, I haven't spoken to my family in 2 years. Yeah. Yeah. There's definitely a dynamic there for sure. Mrs. Ed says something powerful before I go back to the content. Mrs. Ed says, I feel that a part of growing up is coming to terms with the fact that adults, especially parents, make mistakes too, and sometimes in big ways. Yes. And in sometimes in really damaging ways, right? Okay, before I go back to the chat box, let's get into these signs, right? How do you know that something is off here? How do you know that you're dealing with a deceptive individual? How do you know if you're dealing with a controlling individual? Well, here's the first sign: self righteousness. And this is backed by psychology research: self righteousness and self pitying behavior. Let me break that down. A self righteous disposition can be a narcissistic disposition. It can say that if you don't be this way, right? If you don't be this way, if you don't say this, if you don't do this, if you don't come across this way to me, if you don't go get this for me, or placate me, or make me feel loved or cared about, this is going to happen to you. It's the self-righteous disposition of, I have to have what I want, and I want what I want. And when I don't get that, then I self-pity. I cry, boohoo tears. I go around manipulating everybody, lying, creating triangles, right? Triangulation, creating a victim, you know, persecutor, rescuer kind of a scenario. I'll give you a visual of that in just a second here. I do whatever I can to make sure that I get what I want. And the only way that I can do that is to be self righteous and make sure that you are scared or intimidated by my reactions. And then I go around crying or whining or complaining in hopes that this gets back around to you. Okay, so this is an example of what I mean by a self righteous and self pitying individual. Here's what triangulation does. I'm gonna write this out for you if I can find a permanent marker. Here we go. So this is triangulation, okay? There's a victim, there's a rescuer, and then there's a persecutor. Let me clarify persecutor. Let me clarify persecutor. Persecutor is the individual who is pointing fingers, right? You are to blame. You are the problem. You started this. Okay. So they're the pointing fingers individual. That's likely going to be you in this scenario. So let's say, for example, the victim is your mom. She feels like you are constantly pointing fingers at her. Okay. You're pointing fingers at her saying, Mom, you're narcissistic. Mom, you're always selfish. Mom, you don't do anything right. Mom, you need to change, right? You. So she feels like you're the persecutor. She's the victim. Who's the rescuer? Let's say that's her husband or your dad. Okay. Here's the triangle right here. Victim is mom. Persecutor is you. Oh, come on, camera. There we go. And dad or the husband is the rescuer. I'm sorry, guys. Come on, camera. Adjust. There we go. Victim, persecutor, rescuer. So let's say that situation is happening, right? That's called triangulation. Somebody is the victim, somebody is the persecutor, somebody is the rescuer. So these kind of individuals behave this way: deceptive individuals, controlling individuals. If they can get that triangle started, they win, because all mom in this scenario has to do is go to her husband and cry and whine and complain. And what is dad possibly going to do? Get on you. And so that's the psychology of that dynamic. The other thing that you want to be aware of, and that's often a sign of a controlling, deceptive individual, is a pattern of deflection. We all engage in deflection from time to time, right? We all change the topic, throw in a joke, we ask a question. Sometimes we have to say, I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, right? That's a normal part of living. But when deflection is a pattern of behavior, that's a problem, right? A pattern of behavior is chronic, pervasive, consistent, right? Self-loathing. Some individuals who are controlling absolutely hate themselves. And so anything you do or say is a problem to them because they self-loathe. They don't like themselves in the first place. And here you come, pointing out things or maybe placating them or trying to keep the peace. And what does it do? It kind of causes this exaggeration in their mind. Remember, these individuals engage in dichotomous thinking, black and white thinking, polarized thinking. There's no gray, there's no in between. So whenever you do something, even if you don't mean to hurt the deceptive or controlling individual, they don't see that as an accident, right? They're black and white, they're dichotomous, they're polarized. They see you as the devil. And so if that's the case, then they're going to be angry with you. And then on top of that, they hate themselves, they self-loathe. And so that is a recipe for disaster, right? So you're going to see that in these individuals. Behavioral disinhibition is another thing. They're very impulsive, very inattentive, very antisocial sometimes, and they don't know how to gain control over their behavior. They're just not able to do that. Pathological splitting. We all split from time to time, right? If not outwardly, internally. Sometimes we can look at a person and say, I really like her. She's really down to earth. I really like him. He's wonderful. And the next day you see something you don't like and you're like, oh no, never mind. I changed my mind, right? We all do that. But pathological splitting is the problem, where the individual does this in a chronic, pervasive, continual pattern. And it is continual over years, over months, over weeks. This is how they exist. That's a problem. Toxic positivity and denialism. Toxic positivity and denialism. You're going to see this as well. Toxic positivity is toxic because it minimizes the reality of something. It pushes in the background what really needs to be focused on. It pushes and pressures you into a smile, into being positive and happy when reality says there's nothing to smile about. And denialism, that's also something you're going to see in these individuals. They deny, deny, deny. That's who they are. They deny. Their name could be denied. This is who they are. Malingering is something that you're likely to see. It's a fabrication or an exaggeration of something. For the most part, a medical or a psychiatric issue. I once had a client who was malingering, and she would doctor hop. Go to her PCP and get a prescription, drop that one. Go to another PCP and get a prescription, drop that one. Go to another PCP and get another prescription, keep that one, but then ask for a referral to a therapist and then trick the therapist and keep hopping and hopping and hopping. So malingering is fabrication or exaggeration of a medical condition, a symptom, but it's only being used to manipulate in some fashion, primarily to get money or attention or something like that. Paranoia, you're likely to see paranoia with these individuals. They're constantly looking over their shoulders, afraid of everything. That's just who they are. They also don't trust people. Why? I don't know. We could pull up a lot of research. They tend to be liars and deceiving and controlling. So, to a certain extent, they don't trust because of that. They lack self-awareness. Self-awareness. How do you pause and pump the brakes and say, wait a minute, I'm doing it again, if you don't have self-awareness? So these kind of individuals lack self-awareness. They also have an abnormal psychological profile. They just do things that are inappropriate. They say things that are inappropriate. They bypass your boundaries. They harm you. The list goes on. So they have a very abnormal psychological profile. They have dark triad traits: Machiavellianism, psychopathy, and narcissism. They have dark triad traits. Not all of them, but most of them. And lastly, in this category, before I go to the chat box, they have really poor attachment, and they may be stuck in developmental delays, right? You've heard of the individual who's 45, but they cry and whine and complain like a 12-year-old, stuck in a developmental position. Sometimes these individuals are. And they tend to have poor attachment styles to adults, to their own parents. Reactive attachment disorder is really an attachment disorder that can sometimes happen with kids who are traumatized, and they hop from one adoption family or home to the next, or foster home to the next. And those kids can sometimes be diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder. And they grow up into adults that have attachment problems, where they don't know how to trust. When they have everything that they need, it's still a problem. They're angry all the time. They're feisty. They're argumentative, confrontational, their lives are very complicated because of their attachment issues. And so Individuals who control and deceive, very same way. Very same way. This is a lot, right, guys? I'm going to go to the chat box, communicate with you for a little bit. We're going to wrap up. Tomorrow's another interesting live chat. So join me. Join me. Tell me what you think of this. This is a lot, right? Access to Rome, hello and welcome. I haven't seen you in so long. Glad to see you back in tonight's live chat. Sharika, hello and welcome. Thank you so much for that. And I'm glad to see you in the chat tonight. I need to take a break tonight. That's what all this stuttering is. Queen Butterfly says they used to give me no info or tell me last, like way after they told everybody else. Yeah. Yep, that's common too. Yeah. Michelle Lynn, hello and welcome to tonight's live chat. I'm glad to see you. GB Joe says, half sister said we have a mom, but she wasn't motherly. Our fathers or someone else attempted to raise us. Glad now I know. Hopefully that's it. If not, forgive me. That was choppy. Q Quit Award 01. Hello and welcome. Glad to see you back in tonight's live chat. Okay. Phoenix says, and thank you for being a member, Phoenix. Phoenix says, my mom had toxic, abusive, neglectful parents and went through abusive relationships. This, along with her behavior, medicating with alcohol, is why I say she's unhealed. Yeah, I was her mini me for most of my life until now. Yeah. That's a roller coaster, right? A roller coaster, Phoenix, of emotions and thought patterns and fears, right? Yes, you're welcome, Atala. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Okay, looking for comments before we go. Louis S says deceptive family members playing out their family members for their own personal gain is the worst. Yes, it is. Because there should be no deception in a family, right? I agree. We're going to talk about some of this tomorrow. Ellie Wynn says narcs are about power, not love. Thank you for that. I'm glad you put that out there. Not change them through love. Yep, you cannot change them through love, or they cannot change through love. Absolutely. You might as well keep all your love to yourself, because you're not going to get anywhere with a narcissist. Okay. Just continuing to look for comments here before we wrap up. MNL Odell says, as hard as these people are to deal with, their minions are worst most times. Let me go back over that. As hard as these people are to deal with, their minions are worse most times. Boundaries are essential. We should work on boundaries along with mindfulness. I agree with that. You need boundaries with these individuals to stop them from trying to control you. I very, very much agree. Marta Core, you're welcome. Thank you so much for that. That's so humbling. I appreciate you, and I'm always glad to see you in the chat box. Thank you for that. Yeah, Fairy Girl, I'm going to put your comment up on the screen, and thank you also for being a member. Ooh, yeah. Juby Joe says tailgating is a big sign. Tailgating is a huge sign of control, right? I'm just going to ride your tail the whole way to wherever you're going. And sometimes, which makes them look even more immature, sometimes they get in the lane next to you, and guess what? They just fly in front of you without a signal. That one gets me every time. I get so fired up, because it's like, do you realize that you could cause a wreck, an accident, where none of us may actually walk out of this, So you're right, GB Joe. Tailgating is a big sign of a need to control. Yeah. If you want to drive and put your life out there and possibly end it, I'm sorry to say this, but go ahead and do it. But please don't take the rest of us with you. Being foolish. It's not okay. Longevity Rituals says, I have left before leaving is not a problem. Money was. Yeah. Totally get you. Jeanette, I hope I said that correctly. Healthy Connection Talk, YouTube. Hello. Welcome. Chanel M says, I was seeing someone who turned out to be controlling and sadistic. Was I attracted to him because of my traumatic childhood, neglectful parents, leaving bruises and marks on my body during intimacy? Wow, that's a lot to be said there. Um, I don't know. I would need a little bit more details. I want to be wise in giving you any kind of feedback on that one. So I would want to talk to you. But let me just say, you could have been attracted to him because of your childhood trauma and neglectful parents. But it could also just be that he had something that made you feel safe, right? You know, uh, attraction can happen for many different reasons, but for most people, attraction seems to be the result of them having something that you need, something that you feel is essential to your life, right? Whether that's laughter, security, strength, wisdom, whatever it is. So I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to give you any feedback on that without knowing the specifics, but anything is possible. Yosef Badiah says, never having an honest relationship and totally think what you do is wrong. Yep, that's a pattern of behavior. Sharika says, I experienced that today and they just dismissed the whole conversation. Yep. Yep. Deflection, right? James McDonald says, most of my family never respected boundaries. They would ignore them and do whatever they pleased, no matter how disrespectful they were being. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, wow. Thank you, Jeanette. Let me go back to James really quickly. Before I go back to Jeanette, I'm sorry about that, Jeanette. James McDonald says, can deflection be a form of gaslighting trauma? Yes, deflection can be a form of gaslighting because deflection says what you're talking about isn't important. What you're talking about, I don't want to talk about. What you're talking about, I'm going to make it a joke. It minimizes the significance of the encounter, and so does gaslighting. Jeanette, thank you so much. Let me go back to Jeanette now. Thank you so much for that, Jeanette. I'm glad you've been here listening and glad you finally commented. Kat says they're always calling you a liar. Sometimes they can. Jessica J backs that up and says it's always about them. Yes, it is. Dina Da Vinci, I hope I said that correctly. Welcome. Glad to have you tonight. Says I congratulated my sister on her weight loss and went behind my back and told the family I was so jealous of her and pretending to be happy for her. What on earth? Yeah, it was so odd. Oh, I believe it. I'm sorry that happened to you. We may talk about that as well in the chat for tomorrow night. Just Kendra says, welcome. Hello. Glad to see you as well, Kendra. Kendra says, in my family, excuse me, I'm having a hard time here. Kendra says, in my family, this is handled by talking over constantly. My mother will not let me say 2 words before talking over me the entire conversation. Yeah, there you go. That could either be deflection as well. I'm just going to talk over you, double talk you, or it's a form of control. Have you guys ever seen Judge Judy? My mom and brother love Judge Judy. I walk past them and I'm like, another series. Like, are you guys done yet? But they love Judge Judy. And one thing I heard in passing one night was interesting. Judge Judy was correcting somebody and she says, are you trying to double talk me? You know, you're not going to do that in my courtroom. And, you know, she highlighted that was a controlling tactic to try to double talk her. And some people will do that. They'll double talk you or they'll talk all over you in an attempt to gain control over the conversation. Lawyers and attorneys absolutely hate that. Absolutely hate that. Winsley, oh boy, this is tough. Jabatsi, I messed that up. I apologize. Hello and welcome. Glad to have you in tonight's live chat. Yeah, wonderful evening to you too. All right, guys, before we sign off here, I just want to make sure I get a couple more of you. Night Radio Archive, hello and welcome back. Glad to see you. Says, my mother is a stalker, so close to asking a judge for a protective order. Oh, that's rough. That's rough. Let me give you a little bit of suggestion here. You don't want to waste your time with a protective order. If she hasn't done anything that's been detrimental to you, or dangerous. Now, you may feel that, okay, she has. Do you have proof? Is really what you want to look for. And if you want her to just leave you alone, it's probably best to just be like, I need some space, right? The only time you want to take out a protective order is if she truly is stalking you. It's a consistent pattern over time that you can actually prove, and you want to be able to have some documentation to get that protective order. Documentation could be a series of text messages where she's threatening you, a series of voicemails or phone calls that you've got off of your caller ID, right? You want to make sure that you have that actual proof of stalking, because what it's going to look like if you're not careful is you're just whining and complaining and need to go get therapy. Or if law enforcement doesn't take that road, they're going to take another road, which is, I don't know what you want us to do, but we can go talk to her. That's another thing, So make sure that you have all your T's crossed and your I's dotted. Yeah. Yeah. Half the battle knowledge says, you may not see it, but I see it. That's their favorite line. They say that because it's nothing for you to see. Yeah. 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 That's a good point. Thank you for mentioning that. That's a really good point. Fitness, finest God, Rose. I'm so sorry. I messed it up, didn't I? Welcome to tonight's live chat. Glad to have you. Says, what if someone deliberately misdiagnosed you because they listened to a family member? Well, it depends on the age. So if you were diagnosed as an adolescent, as a child, because of another family member's opinion, there's really nothing you can do about that. A therapist is not supposed to ethically diagnose you based on what a family member says. Really, how things should happen is a therapist meets with you, has a particular way that they see you, is seeing some signs and behaviors, and gets secondary information, which is information from people that are in your life. So maybe they tallied up what they thought you had, and then they go to your family members, or your family member talks to them, and that kind of helps cement a diagnosis. But other than that, they're not ethically supposed to be diagnosing you based on somebody else's view. So that's probably not what happened. But if it did happen, that's not ethical. That's not supposed to happen. Elizabeth says, yes, my brother always asks something if I want to tell a story, so I can't tell the story. Absolutely. It derails you. It derails you. Yeah. Guys, I wish I could get to the rest of these comments. I tell you this all the time, that after 2 hours after this goes off, I tend to look at the chat box, the comments. If you want me to answer something, please post it in the comment section. I'm going to be looking at this in the next 2 hours. Yeah. Let me make sure, though, before I sign off. Let me just say, Kev Dower, hello and welcome. I'm glad you brought that up. Smear campaigns can seem like control tactics. I wanted to make sure that I got that in before we left, because that's very, very important. Thank you for mentioning that. Okay, so I'm going to be looking back over this a little bit later, guys. So anything that I missed, add in the comment section. I'll be answering those questions, talking to you guys there. And for those of you that I couldn't get to in the chat box, thank you so much for being with me tonight. I hope this was helpful. We're going to talk about something else that I think you guys can highly, highly relate to tomorrow. If you have a angle that you want me to focus on, a specific topic that you want me to bring into tomorrow's live chat, let me know. I do hear you. So have a wonderful Friday night. I will see you guys tomorrow, hopefully. Bye-bye.